If you enjoy this video and would like to hear more of my stories, please click like and subscribe to be notified of when I release a new story. Everyone knows Millwall and West Ham deeply hate each other. In fact, for me, I think the rivalry is underrated and downplayed by the rest of the country and the world. It's pure hate between the two, and for me this rivalry is right up there with the best of them. But do you know why? Do you know what it's really all about? Do you know how it started? In this video we are going to look at the real history between West Ham and Millwall. We are also going to look at all the violent clashes and incidents between the two. We will also look at books by both West Ham and Millwall top lads and see what they have to say about each other. We will start with the history, then we will go into the violent clashes between the Bushwackers and the ICF. The rivalry between Millwall and West Ham United is one of the oldest and most bitter in English football. The two teams are local rivals from the East End of London, and their feud is characterised by historical factors and geographical proximity. The rivalry is also known as the Dockers Derby, because both teams were originally made up of dockers who worked for rival companies on the River Thames. It all started with the J.T. Morton factory. The J.T. Morton factory was established in Aberdeen in the year 1849. Their aim was to supply food and tinned goods to travelling ships. By the form of expansion, they opened their first processing plant on the Millwall dock in South London. As you can imagine, with Victorian England, a large attraction in the workforce began not just from London, but from across the entire country. 10 years had gone by. Thames Ironworks and Shipbuilding Company were breaking their backs day in and day out. Workers from this dock formed Millwall Athletic. In no hurry, they already sorted themselves in-house, establishing 17-year-old Jasper Sexton as club secretary and Irish international footballer William Murray Leslie as the club chairman. William Murray Leslie would go on to make a whopping, astonishing, amazing 0 appearances for Millwall. Millwall's first match in the footballing world would be a 5-0 defeat to Phillibrook. The in-game errors and shady tactics would be learnt from, and Millwall went on to win the following 12 fixtures. By the end of the season, they only had 3 defeats. The rivalry between Millwall and West Ham United is one of the longest standing and most bitter in English football. The two teams, then known as Millwall Athletic and Thames Ironworks, both originated in the East End of London and were located less than 3 miles apart. They first played each other in the 1899 FA Cup. The match was historically known as the Dockers Derby, as both sets of supporters were predominantly dockers at shipyards on the River Thames. Consequently, each set of fans worked for rival firms who were competing for the same business. This intensified the tension between the teams. In the year 1904, West Ham moved to the Berlin ground, which was then part of Essex, until a London boundary change in 1965. In the year 1910, Millwall moved across the River Thames to New Cross in southeast London, and the teams were no longer East London neighbours. Both sides have relocated since, but remain just under 4 miles apart. Millwall moved to the Den in Bermondsey in 1993, and West Ham to the London Stadium in Stratford in 2016. Millwall and West Ham have played each other 99 times, competitively. Millwall have won 38, West Ham 34 and 27 have ended in a draw. Before the First World War, the teams met 60 times in just 16 years, mostly in the Southern and Western football leagues. They have played a total of 39 times in league and cup competitions since 1916. The teams have usually competed in different divisions, spending only 12 seasons in the same tier of the Football League. Even so, the derbies have retained their passion, and both sets of supporters still consider the other club their main rival. On the 9th of December 1899, the two teams met for their first competitive fixture, a 5th round qualifying match in the FA Cup. Millwall Athletic won 2-1 at Thames Ironworks Memorial Grounds. Their goal scorers were Hugh Goldie and Bert Banks. Millwall reached the semi-final and lost 3-0 to Southampton. but gained the nickname the Lions from a newspaper headline heralding them as the Lions of the South for their cup exploits. The team's second competitive meeting was a Southern League match that spanned 2 centuries. A fixture at the Memorial Grounds on the 23rd of December 1899 was abandoned after 69 minutes owing to smog, with Millwall leading 2-0. Instead of replaying the game, the remaining 21 minutes were completed after the return fixture 4 months later, on the 28th of April 1900. After Ironworks won 1-0, the players took a short rest and played the rest of the abandoned game. With no further score, Millwall won the game 2-0. 2 football clubs with tons of history, 2 sets of passionate hardcore fans, and the final ingredient, iron. Now let's have a look at the violent historical clashes between the Bushwackers and the ICF. Football hooliganism reached its height in the 1970s and 80s. West Ham's intercity firm and the Millwall Bushwackers firm were at the forefront of the trouble, not just against each other, but against the police and firms associated with other football teams. In the year 1972, the 2 clubs played each other in a testimonial match for Millwall defender Harry Cripps, who began his career at West Ham. The game was marred by intense fighting between the 2 clubs' hooligan firms, both inside and outside the ground. 4 years later, a Millwall supporter, Ian Pratt, died at New Cross railway station after falling out of a train during a fight with some West Ham fans. After the incident, West Ham hooligans constructed the chant, "West Ham boys, we've got brains, we throw Millwall under trains." Millwall fans waited patiently for 2 years for revenge, until West Ham were relegated to the 2nd Division. Prior to their next meeting with the Hammers on the 7th of October 1978, leaflets were distributed at Millwall's home matches, bearing the words, "A West Ham fan must die to avenge him." During another clash between the 2 rivals, a Millwall fan, Alan Baker, was stabbed outside the ground and suffered a punctured lung, but made a full recovery. A former notorious hooligan has made an extraordinary claim that away fans must be banned in any games between bitter rivals West Ham and Millwall. Cass Pennant, once a leader of the intercity firm ICF, believes the 2 sets of supporters have genuine hatred for one another, and there would be too many scores to settle to risk having them all in the same stadium. He wrote about the derby in his latest book, You're Going Home in a F-ing Ambulance, Hooligan Wars, The Inside Story, and he said unprecedented measures would need to be enforced in future fixtures to ensure the beautiful game doesn't turn ugly. Citing his concerns for potential meetings between the London clubs, the film producer wrote, "Final word on these 2 teams and their supporters is simply that they should never meet. And the only way you can solve that is to ban away fans. There is a fierce rivalry that is beyond the rivalry of most football derbies." Today, the West Ham and Millwall clubs' fan bases are beginning to change, much like the game itself has in recent years, so don't think it will ever be as bad as the past experiences shared with you here when the divide really was just the River Thames, but football can only hope whenever there is another cup draw or a promotion relegation that has them in the same league or in a cup competition. These 2 clubs aren't drawn out of the hat together, because for some, there will always be scores to settle, just as there were for their forefathers. And speaking about the intensity between the supporters, Hammer's fanatic Pennant said, "If England is the motherland of football hooliganism, then a Millwall-West Ham game is the mother of all hooligan derbies. The bad blood has always been there between east and south of the river. You can go back to your forefathers." When those 2 teams meet, it goes beyond football. The atmosphere is a feeling of genuine hatred and uncertainty. Other clubs' rival fans have long said both Millwall and West Ham have the hardest firms in England. Surprisingly enough, Terrace legend and West Ham former top lad Bill Gardner had nothing but praise and respect for the Millwall Bushwackers, and said this about them. Speaking on the Anything Goes with James English podcast, he said, I think Millwall were the toughest when I think of some of those games we played. More than 300 on each side. You know what I mean? When we went over there, they used to all turn out, and I've got nothing but respect for them. I think they are all right. He continued. It's just a free-for-all really, like they say in the film Zulu. Mark your target when they come, you know what I mean. You know the one you are going to have. I used to always go for the one at the front who was the mouthy one. I used to go for that one, because I believed that you cut the tree at the bottom, the tree will fall. And the praise and respect goes both ways. This time, let's take the Millwall point of view. This is what Millwall Terrace legend Ginger Bob had to say about West Ham. Bob graduated to the Premier League tier of senior hooligan royalty, remaining a feared leader and fighter into the late 70s and 80s, working as part of the Bushwackers F Troop gang. Bob claims to have fought countless people during his time with the firm. But he said the toughest opponent he ever faced was during a brawl with rival London firm, West Ham, in the year 1989. One of their top fighters was a guy called Demolition Chris. He was 6'6". He was wearing steel boots and a boiler suit. Bob told James English's Anything Goes. It was a bit like the OK Corral and who gets in first in the gunfight. I've always had speed of hand, but I got my punch in first, a big one on the chin, and knocked him out in one punch. He could have done me, I could have done me, but I just got in first and done him. In another clash against arch-rivals West Ham, he and 60 of his firm clashed with 300 hooligans near New Crossgate Station in southeast London. It was like Zulu, he said. We all pulled out our baseball bats, and as they got close we were just smashing them with baseball bats. Ginger Bob had this to say about another time he clashed with West Ham. A feared gang of 12 Millwall thugs battered around 125 West Ham hooligans and launched petrol bombs at them, a former firm boss has claimed. Bob recalled a time when he and 12 of his angry mates destroyed a gang of about 125 West Ham hooligans. The incident is known in local footballing circles as the London Bridge incident. Speaking to James English's Anything Goes podcast, where he spoke about his memories from the glory days of football hooliganism, he said, "We weren't event tooled up, they were tooled up. I said to the guys, 'Over you come lads,' and there were 12 of us, and we ran at them." The Birdman threw a petrol bomb that went 60 feet up in the air, and as they were trying to get away, they dropped their weapons. There was a big pile of them, and we just gave them a terrible beating. Ginger Bob said Hammers fans say the incident never happened, but he disputed that as, "I was there at the front of it." He added, "They say it's a figment of my imagination, but it's not." The Daily Star did a bit of digging into the story and found a West Ham fans forum claiming that the story and several other West Ham related Ginger Bob stories are being disputed. According to one member of the West Ham online forum, the story was labelled as the ultimate lie, and a second wrote, "Obviously a case of the story expanding over the years, often the case where a false story becomes the truth as the teller's imagination creates a different truth for effect, probably a case of 12 versus 20, bit of a tear up and Hammers on their toes when a petrol bomb came into the mix." A third added, "Everyone's recollection of the London Bridge incident is different. The petrol bomb was at the start. There were about 40 of us and over 100 of them. We scattered, with some running down the stairs onto Tutuli Street and around 12 running to behind the bar that was at London Bridge, where there were plenty of bottles to chuck to hold back the West Ham. After a couple of minutes, there were police sirens coming from everywhere, which is probably where they dropped their weapons and dispersed a bit lively." Let's have a look at another witness account of the London Bridge incident. From a Millwall perspective, this is what the Millwall lad posted on a Millwall fan forum. "Everyone's recollection of the London Bridge incident is different. The petrol bomb was at the start. There were about 40 of us and over 100 of them. We scattered, with some running down the stairs onto Tutuli Street and around 12 running to behind the bar that was at London Bridge, where there were plenty of bottles to chuck to hold back the West Ham. After a couple of minutes there were police sirens coming from everywhere, which is probably where they dropped their weapons and dispersed a bit lively. I won't mention the car with 4 West Ham 1 who had a shotgun levelled at me, which had me and others running like headless chickens. I dived into a packed cafe and sat down amongst a load of workmen praying they hadn't seen me dart in there. When the two teams met at Upton Park in the year 2012, carnage erupted and violence broke out once again. This is an article in a newspaper the day after the clash. Police are today hunting the men behind the mass violence inside and outside West Ham's ground, which saw a return of 80s-style football hooliganism. A 44-year-old man was stabbed in the chest and more than 21 others injured as West Ham and Millwall fans fought running battles last night. Scotland Yard described the large-scale confrontations as pre-planned and organised. About 200 riot police and 20 mounted officers were pelted with missiles. Onlookers said terrified children were caught up in the violence as bricks and bottles were thrown into the crowds. Police said a total of 13 people were arrested and pledged to track down other offenders using CCTV footage of the incidents. More than 750 officers struggled to contain the trouble as fans broke through cordons and barriers meant to keep them apart. Inside Upton Park, fans fought with police and stewards, and the Carling Cup tie was suspended for a while when supporters invaded the pitch and taunted players and rival fans. Minister for Sport Jerry Sutcliffe described the scenes as a disgrace to football If you have a good away day story to tell, send me an email. If it's decent, there's every chance I will put it in an upcoming video. I want your experiences to be told and everyone to share special away day stories and give you the power. On this channel, I do not mention names, and I won't mention your name either, unless you want me to. So, if you do have a story to tell, please email me at thesecretcasual@gmail.com or search me up on Facebook. Just type in the name Stephen Salters. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. If you would like to see more, because I have many more stories to tell, then please like this video and click the subscribe logo in the bottom right of this screen. Thanks again and see you next time.